Welcome back to Orange Hat Reviews, everyone. Hope you're all having a wonderful day. So, Mystery Review episode 36. I gave the hints of Thomas Jane and aliens. And then, for a final hint, I gave the hint SSDD, which most people know as Same Shit, Different Day, which is the same meaning for the movie that I'm doing. I am doing Dreamcatcher from Stephen King's novel. Now, I have actually read the book a while back, and I have seen the movie. And while Stephen King has referred to this movie as a train wreck, I honestly think, even from an objective standpoint, this movie is actually very well done. So, without further ado, I do say hi to Jacob Ironside. Good to see you. Good morning, good morning. So, yes. Well, actually, good afternoon now that it's afternoon. So, Dream. Oops. There we go. So, Dreamcatcher. It is a 2003 film. Horror considered, sci-fi horror. And it was a movie based on a novel of Stephen King. This 2003 movie was directed by Lawrence Kasdan and stars Thomas Jane, Morgan Freeman, Tom Sizemore, Timothy Oliphant, Donnie Wahlberg, Jason Lee, and Damian Lewis. They are the main players in this film. And one thing I will say is that this movie was very well cast. You have Tom Sizemore playing a character who, much like in the movie The Relic, he has a deep sense of morals and a deep sense of right and wrong. He knows that, or while in this movie, he plays a friend of Colonel who's given over the reins to him, and you think that he would be as bigoted and as extreme as the Colonel, but he turns out to have a sense of honor that, well, also he'll know right and wrong. So this movie has a nice winter theme when it's going through the production logos, WB and the other ones. And this movie is about a group of friends with a special bond that are involved in trying to save the world from an alien invasion with their special friend Duddits. It should also be mentioned, as I said, that this movie was referred to by the original author as a train wreck, Stephen King. Not that I think of anything of Stephen King's thoughts on movies as important, even the ones based on his works, because we all know Stephen King is a freaking idiot. But anyway, the film begins with all the production logos all Frozen themed, winter and snowfall. And then we get some trippy animations with an introduction to Thomas Jane's Henry character. He's one of the main characters. He's a shrink. And all of them have a special gift of just knowing things. It is just how they know certain things. It can't be explained. It's a gift to them, as they all refer to it. So Thomas Jane is talking to this guy played by C. Ernst Harth. He plays a character named Barry Neiman. And he just Thomas Jane completely goes off the reservation of being a shrink, because this guy's talking about his problems, and he's like, you ever thought your guilt might be derived from killing your mother? And he's like, I never told you any of that. And he then just goes into deep detail about stuff that this guy could not possibly know. But he knows it. And so, because how fat this guy is, Barry Neiman, he gets up, breaking the couch that he was sitting on, and then just runs out. He's like, get out of my head, get out of my head, and whatnot. So then Thomas Jane is like, okay. And he gets ready to blow his brains out. I mean, he grabs a revolver, play gun, folks, so as not to piss anybody off, cocks it, and he goes like this. But just before he pulls the trigger, his phone starts ringing. And then he goes down like this, and the gun goes off, blowing a hole in one of his graduation merits on the wall. Degrees. Sorry, I lost the word there. So we then see that it was his friend Jonesy, played by Damian Lewis, asking him, are you all right? What's going on? He's like, no, I'm cool. I'm good. Yeah. And he knows, or these friends are so linked with each other that I love the dynamic between the characters. Timothy Oliphant, Jason Lee, Thomas Jane, and Damian Lewis, all of them had such great chemistry working together in this film that when they're talking to each other, you kind of feel like they might actually be in each other's heads because they just do give off that kind of vibe. And that's how well written the movie is. I mean, these parts are not just played and you could obviously tell they're faking it. No, you feel the performances whenever they're in performance, you know? And so then we get introduced to Jonesy's character, he works at a school, and he suddenly knows that the student in his room has been cheating on his exam. So he starts telling him about it, but then he decides, oh shit, I gotta freaking make up for creeping the kid out. So he rips it up. He's like, except that you were never there. You were at home with a cold. And you can make it up by doing a 3,000 word essay. And so then as the kid leaves, he's like, but how'd you know if you weren't there? He's like, I just know. You know, I just know. And so this film basically is for a little over 2 hour film. This movie is actually well paced, and it keeps you interested all the way through. I did not see a single boring part in this film. Honestly, I didn't. So after or during the call, when he was talking to his friend before he got off to talk to the student, he's like, we should visit Duddits. Now, you don't know who Duddits is yet. And he's like, has Duddits been on your mind a lot recently? He's like, yeah, he has. And maybe we should go see him. You know? And so they agree. Then we're introduced to Timothy Oliphant, who is Pete, another mind reader with talent of finding things at the twirl of a finger. And he creeps out a woman because he works at a car dealership, she comes in asking for a spare key. And he's like, I'll help you find your keys. He does his little trick where he follows all the clues to where he drops her keys. But he also tries propositioning her for a dinner if he finds her keys. And then she drives off because obviously she's creeped out, but she does agree to it and whatnot. And so then he's like, another fuckero. Now, fuckero and fuckery are two words that are used in this film. Pops, good to see you. Lawrence Kasdan has a great resume of films, truly underrated filmmaker. Yes, he is. And thank you for stopping in. So, yes, he really does, Lawrence Kasdan. He directed this very well. And we are then introduced to Jason Lee's character, Beaver. All are mind readers to an extent, as well as being able to telepathically communicate. So it really is interesting. And then we get a shot of Jonesy walking up down the street. He walks towards the car, or he then walks into traffic because you see that he sees something that is concerning him, and he just, without thinking, goes right into traffic and gets hit by a car. And you're like, oh shit. And you see that, or as if from his point of view, looking up in the ambulance after people or get the ambulance called and whatnot. And then you see this young boy, watch out for or Mr. Gay. That's how it is said. Now, if you know the character Duddits, watch out for Mr. Gray. You don't know, or he has a very particular limited speech problem, this child. So then we jump to 6 months later. Also, Beaver, it is established, he's in a bar, he's drinking. He called Jonesy on his phone. He's like, has Duddits been on your mind too? And as he's doing it, or as he's talking on the phone, he's scrolling on the phone booth, SSDD, same shit, different day. And he's like, no, man, it's okay, I'm fine. And then that's when happens. And it's also established that Beaver has an oral fixation. He has a metal case of that holds toothpicks that he always is chewing on and gnawing on, because of it kind of has taken a toll on him, his gift of knowing things, you know? So then 6 months later, at a cabin called the Hole in the Wall, we find out that Jonesy is still alive, and the connection with Duddits, because we find, or he's talking to Henry outside as they're getting wood, and he's like, you know, that day I told you that we should go to see Duddits? Well, I saw him, not as he is now, but as he was when we first found him as a kid. He was beckoning towards me, and I just felt the urgency. That's why I walked out into traffic. And you then see, or as all four of them are talking in the cabin, it's a nice scene where they're just talking to each other, bullshitting around, and they're talking about the memory warehouse. Well, this is Jonesy's memory warehouse, and you see all sorts of nice things in there. And he's like, well, what happens if your head gets too full, man? He's like, well, I burn whatever I have to forget, you know? And there's a few things that I put into a special area where if I don't want to forget them. And you actually see the memory warehouse where he walks it up, and he's walking around with different files and whatnot. And you see things like sexual fantasies, 11 to 13, or 11 to like 18, and then 18 to 26, and then 26 to present. And it's like, oh my God, man, this is just nuts, you know? You see other things like sports, movie lyric, or song lyrics, and other things. You're also hearing the Blue Bayou, or the song The Blue Bayou being played. And it's just very nice things. Hold on one second. Sorry about that. So then, you also hear before that whole memory warehouse scene, I am going to take some of the things out of context and end it, or out of order. There's the fuckery, which Jason Lee's talking about. He's like, I had a really good fuckery. And he's like, as opposed to a fuckaroo, Timmy Oliphant's talking to him. And he's like, yeah. And so you know that fuckeries are good things that end up in sex. Fuckeros are situations that end up being a cock block, so to speak. It's an interesting movie. And you see the carefree nature of these friends as they're as they're talking, and then they take a toast to a giant Dreamcatcher to Duddits, to Douglas Cavell. And then you see the going back in time 20 years earlier to introduce how they met Duddits, these characters as kids, saving him from bullies. And this scene is actually well played out. It shows how Duddit, or one of these bullies, is a jock, and he's trying to force feed Duddits a dog turd. It's uncomfortable to watch because, well, honestly, I've been bullied heavily when I was younger. And seeing that happen to anybody else is kind of hard to watch. You just want to step in. But in this instance, you really can't because it's a movie, you know? So then you see how the kids help Duddits and bring him his clothes because he's been stripped down and he's being bullied by these kids. And then after Henry and them push the kids off and convince the kids to take a hike, they help, or you see how all of them help get Duddits his clothes back. And Beaver starts singing to him. And he's like, if any of you say anything, we'll kick your asses. And they're like, we're not going to say anything, man. So he starts singing to Duddits, the Blue Bayou, and Duddits calms down because Duddits is obviously afraid of these kids. Now, you obviously will understand that they think that Duddits is mentally retarded because he does give off the kind of behaviors or behavioral traits of somebody who is mentally impacted. And they ask him, are you Douglas Cavell? And he's like, I Duddits. And they're like, you're Duddits? I Duddits. And he sticks his hands up, goes, I Duddits. And that is a theme of Duddits. It's, however, it becomes a bigger bond between these kids. It kind of is a way of cementing their bond. And then you see how these kids are. There's another scene later, which I'll get to, but then Jonesy, as they were going to this place, Jonesy recognizes that they were not sent there to look at some perverted picture in a warehouse that they were going to where they found Duddits. They were actually there to meet Duddits. Jonesy, as a kid, picked up on this. He's like, no, we weren't drawn here, or we didn't come here for this. We came here to meet him. And you see Duddits smiling at them in recognition, and it's just really nice to scene that played out very well, because you do recognize that somehow fate intervened with these kids to where they would meet Duddits. Now, what you don't know is that Duddits is actually more special than most people think. He's not just a gifted retard, as one person that I know referred to him as. Ruben, good to see you, man. How you doing? And so then we're going back to the present, where you see Jason is out hunting with Henry or Jonesy, and Jonesy sees a deer and he's ready to shoot the deer, but then he sees a guy walking through the snow and he looks half frozen and he looks like he has frostbite on his eye. And he takes him into the cabin because there's a huge snowstorm coming, while Henry and Pete are out getting supplies from a small little store or about 10 miles away from the cabin, or more like 20 miles. So we then see, while they're heading on their way back, this is where it starts to get weird. They bring in this guy, his name's Rick McCarthy, and when he comes in with Jonesy, his chest is just bulged out, just his chest. And then while Jason Lee's character Beaver comes back in, you see that his stomach or his chest is no longer bulged, but his stomach is. So then they get him, but also Jonesy notices that the frostbite on his eye has actually grown significantly. So you then get the idea it's not just frostbite. It's not frostbite at all. It's a red mark, which Jonesy and Beaver later notice as animals start walking or running away from a certain area. All of the animals, bobcats, bears, squirrels, freaking fishers, weasels, all of them, deer, all of them, just running through the forest trying to get away from something. And you notice that some of them have red or another red mark on their fur, just like the guy that Beaver and Jonesy helped. Well, this guy is now laying down in his bed or in one of the beds, and you get a cut to them going outside while they're watching, and then you hear a helicopter, and they go out, and they're saying this area is under quarantine state. You have to stay where you are. And there's a sick guy down here. He needs help. Stay where you are. We're glad you're okay. And they're like, what? No, we're not. And they're trying to yell up, but they can't really say anything because the sound is too loud from the helicopter. So then more helicopters go by, and you see Morgan Freeman's character, which is introduced. And this is one of the only movies that I have ever seen, except for Wanted, where Morgan Freeman plays an evil character or a not so good character. Now, he plays Colonel Abraham Curtis in this movie, who's been hunting aliens for 25 years, and he knows all their tricks, and he's going to kill them all. He's that kind of gung-ho extremist colonel, you know? And he's looking down at him in his little helicopter, and then freaking Jason Lee, he's like, just flips him off. He's like, and then they go back in, and after a while, we cut to Henry and Pete. They're driving. They see a person sitting in the middle of the path, and then they swerve. Their car flips over, and they're laughing about it as they get out. And he's like, we got to go check on that woman, man. Yeah, when I get to her, I'm going to strangle her even if she's dead, I'm going to strangle her because she freaking ran us off the road. Now, Timothy Oliphant's character is just so freaking nuts. You'd think, or him and Beaver are the ones that are the nutty characters, where Jonesy and Henry are they're the more intellectual, but they also, when they're around their friends, they can let loose and whatnot. So then, as we get to that, the other guys go back into the cabin. Well, Rick, the guy with the red mark on his eye and the bulging body, has made his way to the bathroom. And they're knocking. They're like, "You okay in there?" He's like, "I'm okay. I just needed to go, or I just need to get something out." And they're like, "Where's the blood coming from? Or are you bleeding, Curtis?" He's like, "Blood? I ain't bleeding." And, well, that's kind of bullshit because the bed he was in is full of blood and there's a blood trail leading to the bathroom, you know? And so he's like, "Can't somebody get a little peace and quiet?" So they break open the door, and there's the red stuff all over the room, crawling up the walls into the bath, up on the sink. And you clearly see that Rick is dead on the toilet. He's dead. His face is all bloody, full of the red stuff, not just the blood, but that red stuff as well. And he's like, "I think he's dead, man." And then you hear this plopping in the toilet, slushing of the water. He's like, "No, man, he just dropped a clanker. I think he's still alive." No, well, what's not known to many people is that when you die, if you have any sort of bodily waste inside you, it gonna come out. Gravity's gonna let it out because you're no longer unconsciously holding or keeping your sphincter from letting your bodily waste out. But anyway, he thinks he's still alive because he's kind of creeped out because there's a clanker. And, well, then whatever's in that toilet shoves the body off and then they go or you see the hole that it leaves out of his back end. Whew, it's creepy. Happy day to you, Dino. Good to see you, man. The clues I did leave them on my Twitter. They were SSDD, Thomas Jane, and aliens. So I'm doing Dreamcatcher. But yes. So then they hear slooshing, and then they close the toilet seat, and they feel that whatever's underneath is trying to get out. So Beav sits down on it, and Jonesy has to go for help. And one of the things that these people give off when they're infected with the whatever it was that came out of them. Hex Allen Comics. Good to see you. Thank you for stopping in. And they burp and they fart incessantly because their body is filled up with gas to help deal with the parasite that's in them. So then I'm a big Tom Jane fan. He is a great actor. That dude has range. Thomas Jane does have a lot of range, and he does a great job in this one too. All right, Jonesy, pick up the phone and call 1-800-HENRY. It's just one of the best lines in the film. So, as Beaver is holding down the fort and Jonesy goes to get the tape, he then comes back. He's like, "Oh, and Beef, sit tight." He's like, "Yeah, get the fucking tape." They're going to get some friction tape to help keep the toilet seat down. And Beaver's oral fixation gets the better of him, and he tries to take one of his toothpicks out, but the thing bumps him, and he spills all of his toothpicks all over, and he sees only 2 toothpicks in a clean area of the floor. And so he just really wants one of these damn toothpicks. Well, him doing that causes the creature to get out and latch onto his nuts and bite him in the back of the neck. And then you see that this weird weasel-looking thing has 3 prongs on its tail and opens up its mouth like a fucking cursed potato, man. Fucking just rows of sharp teeth. And scary as hell. And I'm like, this creeps me out. So, then you have Jonesy running in as he's hearing the screaming. And then he sees, this thing is up against the wall and whips at Beaver. And Beaver just looks at his hand. Yeah, the shit weasel is what they call it. Fucking shit weasel. Exactly. And then he looks at his hands. He realizes about this amount of his fingers are missing from under where my hand are above is where they're missing. And it's like, and then it starts biting into him and trying to get a hold of him and whatnot. Well, then Beaver does the noble thing as Jonesy gets there and sees it. And he smacks it, and the thing looks at him and then just bites his face. And he tells Jonesy to get out of there before it kills him. And so he closes the door, leaving the thing in there. And the thing's trying to bust through the door, trying to get out. And it struggles so much that the door handle busts off. And you've got one of his friends becoming British. Yeah, that comes later. I've only seen clips from the movie, but you get me interested. I'll check it out. Thank you, Jacob. But yeah, this film truly does a good job at selling the scare factor of what these things can do. And it's like, oh my God, man, it creeps you out. So then we get to the military, and they're setting up, or before we get to the military, we then see a gray alien come up, walking up behind Jonesy, and Jonesy's obviously scared shitless. And then you also see the shit weasel slither up the gray alien. And then it slinks off of him and slinks away. and the gray alien leans down at Jonesy and then just poofs into a red mist. And as it's going inside Jonesy, you see him breathing it in. It's going through his eyes and ears and whatnot. And then you see the real form of this alien. Big old freaking potato with legs with sharp teeth inside of it. And you then see it totally infect him. And then Eric cuts to the military, where we get introduced to Tom Sizemore, who plays Owen, and Colonel Curtis, who is played by Morgan Freeman. Morgan Freeman, man, I have yet to see him play a bad performance. The man knows his craft. The man knows how to act. And he's an extremist. He's an extremist military. Blue Boy Group is supposed to be an elitist military group that he runs. And he ends up shooting off the fingers of a guy that disobeyed the order of keeping people in the Q zone. He let a mother and their child get out of the Q zone, but the group got them back into the internment area. And yes, you get a very big internment camp vibe from this setup. And it's like, I tell you, slaughtering Americans really turns my stomach. So you know that Colonel Curtis cares, but it has gotten the best of him. His obsession with killing aliens has gotten the best of him. And while yes, he's not a general, he's a colonel, Happy Dino. But yes, you do get the point. He's just an extremist that he'll do his duty, and he's just so desensitized that he doesn't want to consider anything else being or possibly being right. Kind of like somebody else I know. But anyway, nobody on YouTube, personal shit, sorry. So Mr. Gray takes over Jonesy and is on the snowmobile. And you then see him pull out, and he's looking around. He puts the gray hat on, and then he goes, and then he starts driving off. So you now know it's Mr. Gray. It's not Jonesy. And Pete is staying with the dead girl, or the woman that ran him off the road, while Henry was going to look for Mr. Gray, or to go walking towards the cabin, rather. Well, Pete is not supposed to leave the woman to get beers from the wreck of the car, but he does anyway. And he is just drunk as a freaking skunk, talking about his buddy Duddits and how he's putting it together that maybe Duddits came from another planet and he knew stuff was going to happen and whatnot. To be fair, he cares about killing the alien menace and preventing further exposure. Yes, but he's also without compassion. So, and as you hear Pete talking, Timothy Oliphant, you see the slithering through the snow because the woman or the shit weasel crawled or burst its way out of her ass and whatnot. And he's just skunked out drunk, dude. As he's pissing Duddits' name, you see the shit weasel come out and bite him in the dick, and he's fighting it back. He jumps onto the fire to burn the thing off. He rolls off the fire, and the thing tries getting him again, and he ends up killing it. So, while this is going on, you see... Hold on one second. Yep, that's my friend Chris, who is always calling when I'm streaming. He has a very bad habit of doing it, and I'm going to block his damn number if he does it again. No, not block it, but anyway, where was I? Oh yeah, Henry is going, and he senses Jonesy coming toward him. He's like, Jonesy, God damn it, dude, saving the day, man. Like, Mighty Mouse. Wait, Mr. Gray, you're not Jonesy. So he dives off to the side. And I love the dichotomy of Mr. Gray and Jonesy, how they're talking to each other. And he's like, what was that back there that you didn't want me to see, Jonesy? I know there was something back there. He's like, never mind. Who the fuck are you? Why are you talking to me? And who are you? And he's like, so then he calls him and he's like, I ain't telling you shit, Mr. Gray. A pleasant interruption. Yeah. And so he tells him, he's like, how do you know who I am? I've been through your memory warehouse. And yet I haven't found anything on you or how you know who I am. So this does unsettle Mr. Gray a little bit. And then he ends up getting to Pete, and then Pete starts talking about Duddits without mentioning Duddits' name. And he's like, stop talking about him. He's like, and then he also realizes that Pete has the red stuff on him. Now, the red stuff, the military calls it Ripley, as that alien broad, or that broad from Aliens. Well, it's actually called Berum, Berum, I believe. And it spreads rather quickly. Now, one of the differences in the book and in the movie is when Henry dies, he actually, or the Berum has actually eaten out one of his eyes, and he has it all over himself before he gets killed. But in the movie, it doesn't really infect him that much, but it's on his face enough and his neck enough that the alien or Mr. Gray starts manipulating it to hurt him. And he's like, wait, stop. I'll get him to tell you where I-95 is, because Mr. Gray wants to get on the I-95 to get out of the Q zone. So he sees Henry do his little finger trick and then an energy surge from his finger. He's like, well, that's a pretty nifty gift. Want to tell me how you got it? No, not really. So then he has Henry hop onto the snowmobile. And we then see Pete got onto the snowmobile, and Henry gets back to the cabin. The hole in the wall is what they call the cabin. And after he kills the alien serpent that was there, that killed Beav, and he realizes the whole place has a lot of this red stuff and it just keeps spreading all over. You see that the creature has laid eggs. He kills it, and then he burns the babies that hatched from an earlier batch. And then we're cutting back to 20 years ago again, where you see the origin of the Dreamcatcher after you watch it burn. And Duddits takes a bunch of Dreamcatchers that the other kids built in school from smaller ones, and he makes a giant Dreamcatcher. So that is what is the theme of the movie, is that Duddits bonded all of them inside of a Dreamcatcher. Now, Duddits puts it together for the smaller ones, and then they're out and about talking, and they want Duddits to help them find a girl who's lost, as Beaver says, from the Retard Academy. That's what they say in the movie, folks. But anyway, they're like, we need you to save the girl, Duddits. And he says it in his own way, a girl, not the world, the girl, Duddits. And then he's like, Mr. Gay, Mr. Gray. And they didn't put it together then. But anyway, Duddits gives Henry or Pete his power by twirling his finger, lining it up with Pete's. And then Pete is able to cue in on where, or with knowing something and then finding it. And they end up saving the girl. And you see Duddits is smiling about it. And he's like, here, Ozzy. And then they go back to the present. All the scenes where the child versions of them is done, or these two scenes were done very well. It shows that these kids and the adult versions of them really played it very well, because you see them in their child versions, who they are, what they're about, and their different personalities. So you could pick it up very well. And I think that they did a wonderful job with it. So we then get to the present, and the military is attacking the alien crash site. And they're like, who's putting this on the radio chatter? When they start hearing, there's no infection here, please don't kill us, yada, yada, yada. It's like, it's not on the radio, it's put directly on our heads. And you see gray aliens going like this, but then you see two of them panic and start running off, and they drop their illusion, and you see that what they look like in full body. They're basically a potato with a tail, or with a spiky tail at the end, and legs that they run with. And some of them get under the ship as you see the military attacking the ship, or attacking them on the ground, blowing or shooting them up and whatnot. And some of them get under the ship and activate a self-destruct, taking some of the Blackhawks with them. And only Morgan Freeman's Colonel Curtis and Tom Sizemore's Owen get out of it with their Blackhawks. And that scene is actually done rather well. It just shows you just how efficient they're going after him. So when they get back, you also see Henry's now at the place, because the military also found Henry. He's like, I think you can't halt any further or better than this, man. So they bring him there. Now, during this time, also you see Mr. Gray is trying to, or gets a military vehicle, or scratch that before that. Mr. Gray is talking with Pete, and Pete stops talking once he realizes Mr. Gray doesn't know everything and whatnot. So he's like, why don't you talk to me, man? Tell me everything you know. And so, yes, he is also using a British, or when it's Mr. Gray talking, it's in a British accent. And then he's like, bite my bag, motherfucker. I mean, you get some frickin' top of the line weird phrases in this movie, and I really love them. Bite my bag, and freaking fuckery, and all sorts of other shit. And so Mr. Gray's like, very well, Pete, but I'm going to bite more than just your bag. So then he turns into an alien, turns around, and then kills Pete by biting him in half and killing him. And then he seizes a military truck, kills the pilot, or kills the driver, and gets the dog that's with him, which the dog is trying to tell this freaking driver by growling and barking at Jonesy, who is infected. He's like, or you'd think that this driver would just shoot the guy because, well, this dog is panicking. Well, it doesn't work. And then Mr. Gray gets the dog to start eating some of the samples of the red stuff in the back of that truck. So you realize the dog is going to get infected. And then, because there's this momentary distraction for Mr. Gray, Jonesy decides to clear out the Duddits area of his memory warehouse. And then you see the chase happen in the warehouse, where he's packing up all the Duddits files, everything on Duddits. And he gets it into his safe space where Mr. Gray can't get into him. He's like, why don't you let me in there? Why won't you let me in? It's polite to let me in, you know. And he won't do it. And then on the outside of that door is SSDD, you know. So after that happens, Henry is looking at them as they get, or Henry is looking at Owen and the Colonel as they get back from their assault on the spaceship and whatnot. And Morgan Freeman reacts to Henry trying to probe him, because Henry's able to probe minds without any help from the Bureau. And he's able to sense or find out things. And Morgan Freeman reacts to it. He's like, I don't know what that was and whatnot. Damian Lewis played Jonesy as a British actor. Oh, well, then it's an American accent that he did. Pretty good. So, no. So, they talk about it in their ship or about the possibility of a hitchhiker, somebody who got infected and is trying to get or hitch a ride out of the Q zone. And, well, after Owen is leaving the trailer, Henry tells him everything. He's like, how are you going to explain this to your family about slaughtering innocent men or innocent people? Because that's exactly what they were talking about. We're going to have to kill all the people here who are infected. And we're going to have to, and I don't like having to slaughter Americans, but I'll do it for the good of the country if I have to. That's the kind of person that Morgan Freeman is. He will follow orders to the letter, even though those orders are insane and also wouldn't happen under the regular military. So, Henry convinces Owen to alert a General Matheson who doesn't want Colonel Curtis going off the reservation, even though he already did. So he's like, I'm going to help you bust out of here, because he's like, if they get out of my range, I ain't, or the world, or the shit's going to hit a planetary fan. So you got to help me. And so while they're on their way after they escape and Colonel Matheson gets in to takes over the situation, the movie really picks up here. And it's like literally the final half an hour of the movie. Now, when they go and find Duddits, now this is one of the best makeup jobs I have ever seen, because you would have no idea who this actor is who played Duddits just by looking at him. It's Donnie Wahlberg. And they did so much makeup for Donnie Wahlberg being a cancer-ridden Duddits. It's like the only reason why I know his voice, or the only reason why I know it's Donnie Wahlberg, is because of his voice. And that goes to tell you just how well the character is done and how well Donnie Wahlberg committed to the role, because you could swear that Donnie Wahlberg lost a bunch of freaking weight for this movie and kind of just sunk in his eyes and whatnot. I mean, he just looks in a really bad way. So going to his house in Derry, he convinces Owen to go there. And before he goes there, he communicates with Jonesy, and he's like, Mr. Gray, what? And then he realizes Mr. Gray is afraid of Duddits. He doesn't know that Duddits is there, but he is aware of Duddits, of who Duddits is. He doesn't know that Duddits is on Earth. So they pick up Duddits, and he has leukemia. And his mother tells him, he's like, the reason you need to know why I'm letting him go with you. He is so excited, it seems to have reinvigorated him, but he doesn't have long. Here's his medical regimen. And she also knows the secret, or her son's secret, that her son is an alien, essentially. Because it isn't revealed until later on in the movie. But yes, Duddits is also an alien. Not the same as Mr. Gray, but similar in a way. So Henry is having Duddits, or is asking Duddits, what's going on, or how do we stop Mr. Gray? And then he's realizing that he knew about Mr. Gray all the time. Remembering back, he mentioned Mr. Gray before as Mr. Gay. And I think that they touch it really well as they cycle through the memories. But one of the things that I do like is that they don't or go to a solid form of the shots, you could still see the actors talking, but you also see the previous shots of who Mr. Gray is and whatnot. He's like, okay, so he knew about this the whole time. This is what he's been preparing us for. And so then he has Dudditch reach out to Jonesy and Mr. Gray, sorry. And that's when Mr. Gray reacts, and he's like, Dudditch! And then you could just see the terror on Mr. Gray's face. He is terrible. He's like, so that's why he must have had a plan for you that he didn't want you to know about. And you also learn that there's a reason why Jonesy hasn't been fully taken over. It's because when he died and his heart stopped twice after getting hit by that car, he somehow, or this somehow protected him from when he got possessed by Mr. Gray. And he's like, well, this would explain a lot of things. And he's like, what are you talking about? It seems that Dudditch didn't want you to know what his plans were for you. Well, it doesn't matter. My plan is still on schedule. And what is it from your poetry section? I have a lot to do and miles to go before I sleep. So they're going to the Quabbin Reservoir in Massachusetts, where it's the water source for all of Boston and Massachusetts. One worm kills the world. Now, during this time, you also saw a picture or you saw a shot of the gun that Curtis gave Owen. Well, it does a zoom in of the gun and an X-ray version of, or an X-ray shot where it shows a tracker inside the gun. So now you know that Colonel Curtis is tracking Owen, and he steals a chopper after Matheson locks down the area. A chopper that also happens to have a minigun attached to it. Yeah. So we then have them arrive at the Quabbin Reservoir, and one of the things I do like about this shot is Jonesy tells Mr. Gray, he's like, or step on it, don't be a pussy. He's like, thank you, Gary Jones. And so he puts his foot down on the pedal and guns it and ends up crashing. And then you hear Jonesy laughing inside of his head, and he's like, yeah. So he has to carry, so then Mr. Gray is carrying the dog that's starting to bulge. And he then gets into the reservoir, and he's trying to get the thing. Well, or one of the cases open so he could put the damn worm in it. Well, while this is happening, Owen, Dudditch, and Henry arrive, and as Owen is trying to look for Mr. Gray, you have the firefight between Curtis, who has arrived and found them, and Owen. Well, Owen dies, and Curtis dies. They end up shooting at each other, and by dint of good luck or in some good shooting, Owen manages to shoot the back end of the tail end of the chopper, causing it to malfunction and causes Curtis to die and crash. So then we get to the climax of the film, where Henry gets in there, stops the shit weasel from crawling its way over to the reservoir. It looks at him and starts to attack him. And he's like, or it latches on to the MP5 that he took from Owen. And he's like, or he's trying to get to the trigger, and then he grabs it and kills that, or the bigger shit weasel. Well, while him and Jonesy, or who he thinks is Jonesy, is talking, trying to get Jonesy to convince him not to kill him, you then see that the shit weasel, while dead, still laid an egg. And it hatches, and you see the little one slowly trying to make its way over to the reservoir. Well, he's like, tell me something that only Jonesy would know. How about SSDD? Not good enough. He's like, well, then you're going to have to make a choice, my friend. He's like, and he doesn't want to kill him. You can see that Thomas Jane is acting in a way that portrays it very genuinely. He doesn't want to kill this man. It's one of his best friends, you know. It's the only one he has left because the other two are dead. And he's like, what was the name of that, or the day we found Duddits, what was painted on the side of that building? What did it say? And as Mr. Gray is saying it, he's like, no bounce. And then you see Duddits arrive in, no play. And because that's what the building said, no bounce, no play. And then he's like, hello, Mr. Gray. And when Mr. Gray sees him, he then exits Jonesy's body. And Jonesy's still alive. And you see the full-bodied alien, and he points his tail at Duddits, and he's like, you. And you see Duddits with his Scooby-Doo pail full of meds. He's like, ooby-ooby-doo. You got some work to do now. I love how well Donnie Wahlberg plays this scene where he walks up and, yes, Mr. Gray stabs him in the chest, slamming him around, and he then looks over at Henry and he's about to kill Henry, but he can't pull his spike protrusion out of Duddits. And then you see Duddits do his I Duddits for the last time. I Duddits. And then you see him turn into the alien, or another alien, which looks similar to Mr. Gray, but not the same. And he stabs Mr. Gray in the back with his own tail and ends up covering them both in a cocoon, which then blows up into a red mist that's not infectious. And then you see the red mist turn into the Dreamcatcher that Duddits made for his friends. And shortly after that, you see the worm that everybody forgot about or didn't notice, and it's just about to go into the water or into that manhole where the water was, but a boot steps on it, killing it. And it was Jonesy, who's now Mr. Gray free, who kills it and looks up, smiles at Henry, and then that cuts to the credits. Now, that's a kind of a weird area where I would say that it's just an weird ending, weird way to end it. But the movie did carry on over 2 hours. It's 2 hours, 13 minutes long. And Damien, yeah. And one of the ways that I really wish that they could have ended it was having Jonesy and Henry, sorry, I blanked on the word. I lost the name there. Walking out and seeing a deer with the red, or with the Biram, the red stuff on it. It would have been cool if they had shown that, or it shows the red stuff just slough off or just disintegrate and no longer be there. To show that there's some way that, or to show some way that with the death of all the aliens, this stuff is no longer infectious, you know? So that's the end of the film. And honestly, I'm going to get to the scoring. Objectively, the only real weak point about this movie that I saw was the special effects, the digital effects. They could have been tightened up a little bit more. Even for a 2003 movie, the special effects were good, but I feel that they could have been tightened up a little bit more because I have seen better special effects at the time of that during that time. As for subjectively, this movie is really a 10 out of 10. I actually like it a lot. I thought it was a good story, creeps you out in the right ways. It shows shows great chemistry with the actors. Movies, it's just really good. It has some great lines in it too. moviegoer, if you're a horror film fan, if you're a Stephen King fan, you'll like this movie. I'd put it at a 9 to a 10 out of 10. I really enjoyed the movie. I thought it was good. And I don't regret buying it either because it's a decent movie. And Donnie Wahlberg freaking kicked ass in this movie. As brief of his performance as he is in the movie, he still does a great performance. I mean, honestly, I would actually say he deserves a freaking award for it. Not that awards mean anything nowadays. But anyway, we're going to get to the hints for the next film. And the hints for the next movie are Merlin and Jester. Believe me, if anybody gets these, if Epi the Oz gets these, honestly, wow. But yeah, Merlin and Jester. And you will get a final hint. So make sure that you pay attention to the playlist of mystery reviews. Once the stream is created, you will see a bonus hint. So that will make it easier for you to guess. But if you know it, you know it. If you don't, you don't. Anyway, folks, that is going to be the video. Thank you so much for tuning in. Also, before I do go, I should have said this at the beginning, and I'm sorry for that. But say a prayer for my friend Supreme Heretic Drew Taylor. He is going through a very rough time right now. His mother is in the hospital. So if you could, show a lot of support for Drew and pray for his mom. He's got he's going to have a very rough time ahead of him. So also subscribe to the Supreme Heretic if you can. His channel is called the Supreme Heretic. It's a great channel. He does some great streams over there, reviews as well. He talks about political stuff. It's great stuff. And support him as much as you can because he is truly one of the better ones out there. Anyway, folks, thank you so much for tuning in. Drew, I'm praying for you, buddy. I'm praying for your mom as well. And I will call you as soon as I'm less busy. But I will call you either today or tomorrow. So, Drew, much prayers to you, folks. You all know the drill. Like, comment, subscribe, share, all that jazz. Let me know your thoughts down in the comment section below. What did you think of Dreamcatcher? Did you like it? Did you not? Are you going to watch it? Let me know all your thoughts to that, folks. And take it easy, Jacob. And thank you to Jacob Ironside, Happy Dino, Pops, Hex Allen Comics, Ruben, thank you for coming in. Ruben Thomas Official. Thank you to all who popped in, left a like. Thank you so much. And anyway, folks, this has been Orange Hat Reviews. Stay humble.